At some point, you may have to go back to the big boss and say, hey, this isn't working, right? Customers don't like bad news, but it's better to proactively give them the potential bad news than tell them on Friday at 4:30 when they're getting ready to leave for their kid's Little League game that, hey, the system's not going to go live on time and we're going to be 6 weeks late. I don't want to throw her out there on her own. I may have to look at my existing staffing and realizing I've got Betty over here and she's the expert. I'm going to pair her up with this apprentice. On a monthly basis, you're checkpointing with what do things look like this month compared to last month compared to the next 3 months? Are we trending in a certain direction?
This is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast, where we are here to educate, equip, and inspire people to build extraordinary companies. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you can get updates every time we drop a new episode. Now let's get it started.
Guys, this is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. My name is Rick Meekins. I'm the managing partner at Epiphany Business Consulting and your host today. And we are joined today by Mark Sloan. Mark, how are you?
Very good, Rick. Good to be here.
Awesome. Mark, where are you coming from?
I am in Ithaca, New York. So my wife and I just relocated a year ago from Washington, D.C., where we'd been for most of the last 25 years. But our youngest flew the coop, and we decided to head for cooler temperatures.
Goodness, and a little bit more slower pace too, yeah?
Definitely slower pace. But it's interesting. With COVID, working from home for so long, you were sitting in your home office on the internet. I've got, fiber to the home right now. And so it doesn't feel different, except when I look out the window straight ahead, I see nothing but green.
I hear you. It feels like I just making that drive up from here in Atlanta up to New Jersey, where my family's from. It's like I'm going through DC, and it's just like the whole time, just like, ah.
Well, I was fortunate there because I lived in Old Town Alexandria, right across the river from DC. And I, for most of the time, worked in Alexandria, where it was either a short drive or a walk to the office. But it was those times when I had a 20-mile, hour-and-a-half long commute that told me it wasn't probably the place I wanted to be for the next 25 years.
I hear you. I did a short stint in New York.
Okay.
Manhattan downtown, and I'm staying in Jersey City, and so it's like, paying $20 a day for parking, I'm paying for the trains, et cetera, getting in and out of there. I think when I was younger, it seemed like the dreams, like, hey, I'm going to work in Manhattan, blah, blah. Man, I hated it. I came back here, 17-hour drive, just straight through, just like, I'm ready to go back home. Mark, so thank you again for joining us. Huh?
Absolutely.
So you want to tell our audience a little bit about you, where you come from, what you do, and why you do it?
Yeah. So I am currently, I call myself the consultant's consultant. So I work with consulting and professional services organizations to optimize performance, profitability, figure out how to do things better. I come to this from 30 years in the consulting world. I did a dozen years at Anderson Consulting, Accenture. I left because I was tired of being on the road. I had a young family, and I got recruited on this job spec that said, come and lead a team of 8. And I thought, well, hey, this will be nice. I'll be home at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock every night with the kids. And long story short, as I got there, the company launched a new software product, and they said, we want you to run that professional services team too. And we grew it to 1,600 people in the span of 4 years. My nice little day job was a little bit more intense. And honestly, we learned a lot on the fly, but we built a book of best practices, I suppose, of how to build and run a people-based business. And as I left there, I've pretty much for the most of the last 15 years been consulting back to technology companies, software companies with a professional services arm, pure consulting firms on those things we did, those things that I've seen other people's do well, and just help them get better, quarter over quarter.
Awesome. Is this like a passion project for you, or is this just something that you're really good at that you want to share with the world, or what's your story there?
It's probably a combination of all of it. The origin story for all of this was, as I got out there, the job spec said lead a team of 8, and when they launched this new software product, the sales force was super excited, right? Because company was going from selling outsourcing deals, which take a year, 3 years to consummate, to they thought, closing a deal once a week, and they'd have all these commission checks rolling in. So they built up this huge pipeline. And I had a sales VP that would tell anyone that would listen, Sloan's going to be 600 people short if all these deals hit. And I went back and looked at my job spec and it said 8. So no one was going to let me go hire 600 people, 100 people, 50 people. But I knew what he was doing. He was setting me up for if I was ever one person short and we didn't make revenue for the quarter, I should get flogged and he should still get comped, right? And so I had to figure out how to navigate through this. And I built this resource management process that translated the sales pipeline to a resource pipeline, laid it out over time. And, and this guy, Mike, was right. If everything hit on the same day, we were 600 people short. When we laid it out over time, at most we were 70 people short. When you factored in the probability of win, we were like 25 people short, right? And so I sat down with Mike. I pulled in the VP of finance. I pulled in HR and said, hey, according to Mike and these probability, we should go hire 25 people. And the VP of finance fell out of his chair, got back up and said, 25 people, we can't afford that. But I got agreement to go open 5 or 6 recs. And that's why HR was there. And we went out and we interviewed. We built up a pipeline of candidates. So when deals closed, we had the people we wanted to go hire. We'd hire them and we'd be able to get going, right? And this process enabled us to scale to 1,600 people around the globe in 4 years. It was, to me, it was like this great problem solving moment. So I've got passion around it. And as I've been out there working with other companies, they all, not all, a good number of them face this same problem, right? It's feast or famine. And so it's really about how do you leverage data to make these informed decisions when you need more people, when you start to see in advance, you're going to have excess people so that you can take proactive steps to, consume the capacity. Arm sales with go sell these type of people, go sell these types of projects, or, hey, HR, you better ramp up the recruiting process because, we got more demand than resources and we got to get prepared.
Yeah, it always seems like you said, it always seems like that's going to be a good problem to have. It's like, oh, it's raining, but yeah, the customer delivery side of things is, I mean, it's got to be there. If you're, bringing in the sales and you're not, turning over the product or delivering the service, then you got a problem. You got a big problem. It's your reputation, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really just about leveraging data to bridge the gap, right? I mean, so many companies that I've consulted with, it's, the groups, sales and services are in, they're in different silos. They talk occasionally, but it's lobbing bombs back and forth, right? As opposed to let's just look at the data collectively and let's make data informed decisions to support this.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, how deep in the data are we looking? What kind of data points are we looking at?
Yeah. So it's, if you take the sales pipeline, right, and it says, hey, this is a 100,000, a million, a $5 million project, you convert that to the resource, allocation. And typically the revenue is built up from a resource plan. So you're looking at by project. Hey, I need 1 of these people, 3 of these people, 4 of these people for these durations. And you're just adding that all up in a big spreadsheet, if you will, across the whole portfolio. So it's interesting. Excuse me. When we started it, we concentrated it within one group. We then expanded to other groups. We went to Europe. Now you're still primarily looking at it group by group, but you can aggregate it as well and see how you're doing overall. So I've worked with called a top 10 systems integration firm who leverage this process as well, right? And they're 50, 60,000 people, but you're not sitting around the table talking with the entire sales force at once. You're breaking it up into region, into practice, etc. So it's a highly scalable process, and it scales up and down, as needed.
As a smaller company, I mean, how does that application work? You're looking at, a firm that's, 10, 20, 30 people.
It's almost more important for the 10, 20, 30 person organization than the 500, 1,000, $10,000 organization, right? Because if you've got 20 people and 25% of your staff is not billable, that's a, big hit to the bottom line versus, a large organization. They can mask some things financially, right? Because they've got, the law of the masses that dooms it. With the smaller organization, right? It's super helpful because you can start to see, okay, a month, 3 months, 6 months out, I've got 30 people and it looks like I've only got demand for 15. So having that information, quickly being able to see who the 15 are that aren't going to be staffed, their capabilities, the projects they can work on, and you can get the sales force out there selling that type of work. Or if you've got demand in another area, you can get those folks some cross training so that they're prepared to handle that work. So it's really just about creating visibility to what does the future look like, right? And you're never going to be exactly precise, but you're going to give yourself scenarios that you can plan for. Do we hire? Do we sell this? Do we cross train that? And just again, helping yourself be prepared.
Yeah, yeah. Now, what about the opposite end of that spectrum, where where they're trying to create demand? They've got a product or service, they've developed, and they're like, hey, we're really good at this thing, but we don't have the customer base to really numbers that we're looking.
Sure, sure. I think with that, right, you're still going to be trying to generate demand. Your concern is going to be, we're not quite sure if it's going to close. So we don't want to go hire in prep for that and then not have the work. Whether it's an organization like that or an organization that's large and growing and already has a resource pool, I advocate 10, 15% of your staffing could be done by third parties, right? So you go build a relationship with a systems integrator who, look, we want you to be our partner. You're not going to do all the work, but we're going to make sure we carve out a chunk of work for you. And they give you that flex capacity. So if things start to dry up, you can ramp them down and your costs go down, and you don't hurt the bottom line.
Yeah, yeah. How do you get so in a situation like that? I don't know if you've worked in this space, but I mean, how do you keep folks like that engaged? I mean, we work with a lot of freelancers, and it as you said. I mean, it allows us to scale up and down as we need to, but the engagement, making sure that, hey, I've got a project, I need you to be on board. Yeah. I mean, they're trying to feed their own families.
No, absolutely, absolutely, and this is, I don't advocate just to cut them loose, right? Like just whatever. It's about building this long term relationship, right? And if let's say I'm the software company and my neighbor builds the small little consulting firm that can implement the software, I'm gonna want to keep him happy. I'm gonna want to keep work for him. I'm gonna share my forecast with him and say, hey, Bill, here's what I've got for the next quarter, the next 6 months. It looks like I might need to ramp up a little bit. I don't want to hire. Can you go get those resources? Conversely, it could be, look, things are tightening up a little for us, Bill. I may have to decrease your workload a little, but I'm giving him advance notice so that he can go find other places for his resources. What I don't want to do is, you know, March 30th, tell him, yeah, the 15 people that we've had on staff from him, they're going to be gone April 1st, right? I don't want to do that because that's where, takes a hit out of his wallet. What I want to do is tell them, hey, Bill, in about 2, 3 months, it looks like we might be ramping down unless we can get some more demand. And I'll tell you, but that gives him advanced visibility to take the steps that he needs to take.
Yeah, absolutely. Communication, communication.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think one of the things that you alluded to before was just making sure that you can that likelihood of closing that deal. So you've got that this push pull thing that's happening. You're out there, you're trying to sell. You've got your feast of famine thing going on. It's like, okay, it's feast time. I need to bring in these guys. Not necessarily thinking about, okay, when this project ends, what do we have after that? Do you advise companies on that, and what's your thought?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, again, I think I keep coming back to this forecast report that we produce as part of the process, and it starts telling you here's what the scenarios look like 1, 3, 6 months out. So as things are winding down, you start to see, look, it looks like I'm going to have surplus capacity. And here's the skills, the capabilities of that capacity. And then that's what you're feeding into your sales process. Sales is selling what you can actually deliver, right? And you want to consume that capacity the same way a manufacturer is looking at their plant manufacturing capacity. And hey, look, we've got a whole bunch of idle capacity for blue cars. Let's get out there and find homes for blue cars, and we'll start producing them, right? And get that through our factory. That's what we're doing with the resources. We're taking a look at what's the capacity, how can we deploy it, and let's go generate some demand for that. And that sounds easy, right? It doesn't always materialize that demand, but if something else is materializing through my forecasting process, I've got visibility to what that type of work is. And I can look at Betty, Bill, and Bob and see, oh, I need to get them into this training course or get them, sort of a mentor that's going to teach them how to do X, Y, and Z so that they can fill that role on that project. And I'm consuming that capacity that I have. And really, I'm keeping everybody happy. I'm keeping the end client happy because we can start when we said we were going to start. I'm keeping the CFO happy because we're consuming capacity. I'm keeping employees happy because I'm finding a way to keep them employed, and get there. So this process really breaks down the barriers and gets the organization working together, a lot more cooperative.
That's fantastic. So, in a way, it sounds like you're talking about like a dynamic organization. We can scale up, scale down, as we need to. We're pouring into our people. We're keeping people informed, et cetera, et cetera. I'm wondering about like how we maintain that level, excuse me, level of customer experience, though. So you've got people that are coming in, aren't full time to the company. They've got, maybe they have other projects or whatever. That customer experience, the customer delivery is going to be, important. How do you maintain that? How do you even track that you're doing that the right way?
Yeah. And for me, I call it strategic staffing. So if we've got something and hey, look, there's a third party, a freelancer that I need to pull in and work on it, who doesn't have, only has, let's say, 75% of the required skills. I don't want to throw her out there on her own. I want to pair her up with, the master, and she's the apprentice, so that they're going out there together. Right. And so I may have to look at my existing staffing and realizing, hey, I've got Betty over here and she's the expert. I'm going to free her up 25% from her current assignment and pair her up with this apprentice so that, okay, look, there's somebody that's going to guide this third party. They're going to educate them. They're going to be a buffer with the customer. And so then by the second or third engagement, this third party is going to be more of the expert and more somebody that you may be able to put out there on your own. So it does require a little bit of extra work, but in the end, to your point, it maintains that customer relationship, the customer satisfaction, and really accelerates building the skills because I'm learning from somebody that knows how to do it as opposed to just getting thrown in the deep end on my.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's perfect. That's perfect. Is there a model that you've put together or that you work with typically with respect to like customer engagement or customer experience?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a high level model in my head to some degree, right? And I have put it on paper from time to time. I come to it from my 12 years at Anderson Consulting Accenture, right? And so it's interesting for me to try and put it on paper because I just sort of grew up with it, right? And the mental model I have was really driven by a guy named Larry Brewer. He was my manager. I was probably a year and a half into being a new consultant. We had worked on this project in a manufacturing facility for the customer. Larry walks up to me one day and he's like, "Hey, have you talked to Walt today?" And I said, "No, I haven't talked to Walt today. I don't have any questions for him." And that's not what I asked. I didn't ask if you had questions. I asked if you had talked to him. I said, "Well, no, I don't have any questions." He's like, "That's not what I asked." Right. And I finally, hit myself on the head and realized he was telling me, just go talk to Walt, build a relationship with him, ask him about his kids so that when you do need something, you're not that pesky, consultant coming to annoy him. It's Mark, right? And he knows about me and my wife and what's going on. And so, I try and build relationships that way, not in a manipulative way, right? But in a way that, okay, they see me as a person. And they want to help me as much as I want to help them. And I teach this consulting soft skills class, and we go through these lessons and how to build those relationships so that it's a win-win, right? And they see that you do care.
Yeah, that's key. I think that's one thing I love about what I do is you get the opportunity to have like those personal relationships. But I think it's great, just to be able to touch so many people in that way. I love that. Is there a pattern that you use, or is it more of a I don't know? Is it just kind of like just like a feel out thing, or how do I know I'm
Yeah,
doing this right? Outside
yeah,
of the results, I guess.
yeah. For me, it's more of a feel, right? Because I have had clients that they don't want that relationship, right? They want you to get in, they want you to get the work done, they want you to drive it. I've had client relationships where they come over for dinner, or where they know my wife and kids because we've socialized and done things together. I think the key is whether they're touchy feely friendly or they're not, the key focus has to be on delivering on the objective for the project. And I say this because I had one particular client that I'm picturing in my head now where I was working 14, 15, 16 hours a day because I could not seem to make this particular client happy. I would put a deliverable in front of him. That's not what I was looking for. I'd put another one. That's not what I'm looking for, right? And I thought I was failing, right? I did not have this great personal relationship with him. I wasn't delivering on what he wanted. At the end of the project, he actually wanted to hire me, and I sort of went home and said to my wife, I can't believe that this guy wants to hire me based on this experience. But I think the key lesson for me there is don't expect to receive what I might give to others in terms of when we're working together and feedback and all that. Just keep doing what you think is right, the good work. And another little aside story there, as a kid I grew up working for my father who had a couple small businesses, and I'd complete a task and I'd say to him, hey, what am I done? And his answer every time invariably was, what do you think? Right. And he didn't want to tell me if I was done. He wanted me to know when I was done. Right. And that I took that lesson into this particular relationship with this particular client. It's like, look, I'm doing the best that I can. I'm delivering something that I am proud of. He might not like it. But I know I did the best I could. And in the end, I take it as a pretty positive that he was willing to, offer me a job.
Definitely, definitely, definitely. You ever get? Do you as you're working with consultants? I mean, do you advise consultants on perhaps toxic relationships as well, and perhaps like exiting those types of projects?
A little bit. There's a book I read a number of years ago called I'll just say the no a-hole rule, right? And it was all about building teams, building relationships. Don't be an a-hole, and don't work with a-holes. And I think there are times, very rare, very infrequent, where you may have a client and they might behave like an a-hole, right? And you have to dig into, look, here are the objectives, here are the tasks, here are the deliverables we all agreed that we are going to deliver, right? Are we not delivering against those? Well, no, you've done what it says on paper. Okay. So how does this not align with what you want, right? Well, I wanted this, I wanted that. Okay, well, let's talk about that, right? So sometimes you have to, sort of peel back the layers of the onion to get what is causing the grief. Now, there may be times where, hey, look, you signed a deal with the big boss and they put you on with, hey, here's Betty's going to be your point of contact and you have to work with Betty. At some point, you may have to go back to the big boss and say, hey, this isn't working, right? Here's what we agreed to. Here's what we said we're going to do. Here's what we've delivered. We're not hitting Betty's objective. So we need your help navigating with Betty what the deltas are between what you were expecting when you signed this deal and what she's expecting. But you do it professionally. You don't throw anyone under the bus, and you always come back to the objectives, right? You come back to the contract because that's the holy grail of what you're working on. And there's nothing wrong with making changes to a contract if somebody wants something different, but you have to have those discussions first.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I think I've had those experiences, and it's like I get very passionate, about delivering a great product. It's like we're going over deliverables and that sort of thing, and it's like, oh well, we can do this, do that, do this, and it does get hard. I think the looking at I think sometimes I get so focused on delivering a great product that sometimes it does become a little bit toxic, and I'm just like I'm stressed about going into the project, and it's really interesting. It's really something worth having a conversation about. I think. Like, what
Well,
do you do
I
there?
worked for a partner a number of years ago at one of the firms, and I was doing the same thing. I was striving for this, perfect deliverable. And this was the first time I heard the expression, perfect is the enemy of the good, right? It was, hey, look, you've addressed the questions, you've answered it, right? Maybe you put them in columns and the client may end up wanting them in rows, but don't sweat that stuff, right? Like address the question, polish it up nicely, put it in front of them, start having those discussions and, and get that going. Cause I think at times it's interesting. Like a lot of consultants, I think are introverts versus extroverts, right? Which it's counter to the stereotype, I think. But we like working on those deliverables. We like putting our head down and documenting everything. But you got to lift your head up and you got to go talk to the customer and engage them in that process, right? You got to go talk to Walt, ask him about his kids, so that when you put a three-quarter baked deliverable in front of him, he's not going to react negatively. He's going to say, "Oh, this is a work in progress. I get you're asking me for some feedback and input here," and so by doing that interactively, it actually makes things a lot smoother in the long.
Yeah. What are the biggest challenges you see consultants making? As you're working with them.
I think one of the biggest ones is around this resourcing thing, right? And what I say is most consulting organizations, they're focused on what I call the -5 to +10 or 15-day window, right? We sold something. Now we got to figure out how we're going to staff it, right? We sold it a few days ago. It's going to close tomorrow. How are we going to staff this? And they're not looking at their pipeline and they're not looking 1, 3, 6 months out to say, what are the staffing scenarios we might encounter? Let's plan for those now. So as once it's signed, we've already thought it through, right? And it's a lot easier to think clearly, coherently when you give yourself time versus, oh, we need somebody to be out there tomorrow and we're gonna have to put them on a plane across the country and they're gonna have to drop everything else they're doing, right? You get the job done, but there's a lot more stress and frustration. And I think it's a lot of what leads to burnout and attrition in the industry because people don't like being whipsawed. They like to be able to plan 1, 3, 4 weeks out, and not all of a sudden have to jump on an airplane to get somewhere.
Yeah, definitely, definitely, definitely. Yeah, that's one of the things. I never worked. I never had an opportunity to work at one of the bigger firms, but I mean that was the story. It was like 3, 4 year burnout and this and that, this and that. I was interested. I have to admit. Accenture was one that I was looking at. Bain, was another one that I was interested in working with, and because it seemed, the story seemed great. Put it like that. I'll put it like that. But talking to a lot of consultants like yourself and others, it was just the reality seems a lot different than the picture that's painted. Beyond communication or letting people plan, are there things that you do like when you're working with companies to help with their overall culture and try to reduce that attrition rate?
Yeah, yeah. I think in part beyond doing better staffing and forecasting of where people are going to need to be, it's providing training. Right? What are the tools and techniques that your people need? And there's the hard skills. If you're implementing a software product, they need to know the software product. You're going to give them that training. But the other thing we focus on is what makes an effective consultant, right? And putting folks through some guided training sessions where they're working on communications, they're working on how to manage risks and issues proactively. What are tips and techniques? Right? Customers don't like bad news, but it's better to proactively give them the potential bad news than tell them on Friday at 4:30 when they're getting ready to leave for their kids' little league game that hey, the system's not going to go live on time and we're going to be 6 weeks late, right? Because of this mistake, right? So it's really about teaching consultants to put yourself in the client's shoes. How would you want to be treated? And making sure that they proactively address those things in advance.
Yeah, yeah. I guess one of those big conversations, kinda like you were mentioning, is project running late. I mean, we have this this timeline. It's like, okay, if everything goes perfectly, it's going to be we're going to hit these dates. I mean, how do you effectively manage that? You get a project that was supposed to be a 3 month long project or a year long project, and suddenly it's twice as long.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, those things are going to happen, right? And so when you find out it's going to be delayed, right? It's laying out. Okay, what are the scenarios? Okay, it looks like it's going to be 3 months long. Could it be longer? Could it be shorter? Getting as much information as you can about the risk or the issue at hand, putting a plan together, right? Consulting with your team, with folks inside your company that maybe aren't on the project, get a good lay of the land, right? And I'm not saying take weeks to do this, but as quickly as you can, understand it to the best of your ability. Then sit down with the customer so that they're aware. Again, right? You want to avoid surprises that are after the deadline, right? Walking in and telling them about an issue is still going to be a surprise. But when they see that you're on top of it, right? Here's what we found. Here are the different ways this could play out. Here's what we're doing to figure out which path is going to likely be reality. They at least, you get them in a place where they feel like, okay, I don't like this, but they're in control, right? It's like when you watch one of the movies where the space ship's going up and there's an issue, but there's somebody at mission control that takes charge and runs through the steps and gets them back safely to to Earth. That's what clients want, right? They want somebody that's going to take charge, manage through it, let them know when things aren't going well, and tell them how to navigate. How we're all going to navigate back to a safe place.
Yeah, it sounds like a specific like process or playbook, that that firm will put together.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah, yeah. I think it's I'll call it a framework more than a process, right? And the framework is really about communication, understanding what's going on, engaging the client in the process, so there's no surprises, right? And as individuals, we all then have to figure out what's the best way to do it, right? Or I'm working with this type of client versus that type of client, personality wise, what's going to be best, right? So I've had clients, client named Roger. I could walk in on a Friday afternoon and tell him we got a problem and I'm not sure how to fix it, but here's what I'm doing. And Roger would take that okay. I've had other clients where if I walked in and told them that on a Friday, they would be quite upset, right? And we'd be working 48 hours over the weekend to try and get them happy, right? So you have to gauge the client profile and what type of information they're going to need, and then act accordingly.
That could come into a degree. I mean, you're even, and again, I'm coming from the perspective of a smaller company, but I mean, you're really putting a lot of effort into finding the right clients because it is more of a personal. We talked about like the personal relationship and the value of that, and then the trust, through communication, that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you can put together an ideal client profile, and you can fill your pipeline with that, great. I've yet to be able to do that. Right there are going to be some client profiles that get through because hey, look, we need they need us and we need that revenue for the quarter. So you do have to learn to interact with different types of client profiles. The other thing you do is depending on your size and scale, you figure out who your team, which profiles they deal better with, right? And who can they interact with. And I had a gentleman that worked for me a number of years ago, right? He was the peacemaker. He could walk into very difficult situations and build a rapport with the customer, and then figure out what's going on and how to do it. There were other instances where there was another person that worked for me, and look, sometimes you just had to lay down the law and and really sort of hammer the client over the head, and we would send him into those situations, right? So you've got to match the client profile with your personnel profile at times too. It's not always going to work, but that's where as I was mentioning, some of these soft skills training courses help people figure out, okay, this is that type of profile. So here's what I need to do. This might not be in my comfort zone, but we went through some case studies. I've practiced it a little bit, and now I'm going to get some real world training on how to deploy these capabilities.
Awesome. You keep bringing me back to we have one of the things that we have here is a playbook. It's just like okay, this happens. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And I love the way that a lot of what you're saying is just like okay, this fits into our playbook. Rick, he deals well with this type of person, blah blah blah. Or if something goes wrong, this is what we do. Or these are different ways these things can play out. I think in the back of my mind, I was thinking about the scenario planning. And so you talked about that in a few different areas. And I'm curious. I mean, how much time and effort? How regularly are we doing the scenario planning? Is this a once a month, a once a quarter, once a year? When the need exists, what do you see or what do you feel?
Yeah, the classic consultant answer is it depends, right? It depends on the situation. I mean, yeah, in extremely intense client situations, you might be doing it, once a week, once a day, right? Like really planning things out. So I think you have to gauge, right? Again, the same way you have to gauge how do I deal with personality type A versus B, you've got to gauge, how you're interacting with those. Now, I think some of the back office processes, right? You're doing those on a weekly, monthly basis. Again, I keep coming back to this resource management forecasting. On a monthly basis, you're checkpointing with what do things look like this month compared to last month, compared to the next 3 months? Are we trending in a certain direction? Are we, all of a sudden we've got an anomaly that we have to take care of? But on the client side, right, as you're interacting with people, that's really where you have to sort of, read and react, right? And start to figure out, okay, is this a dynamic, volatile situation where we better have daily checkpoints? Is this, hey, this client's the best, we're friends, and, once a month I'm sitting, in my car on the way home from work thinking about
Yeah, yeah, I got you. I got you. Cool, cool, awesome. Words of wisdom you want to drop to, perhaps consultants or business leaders. Remember you by.
talk to Walt, right? Talk to
Well,
your
I love
clients,
that.
talk to them like people, build a relationship. Again, some clients you're going to have way better relationships than with others, but you want them to understand and know you as a person, right? Not just somebody who needs information from them, somebody who's trying to get something out of them. And again, I'm not doing this to be manipulative. I'm doing it because it just makes life and work more enjoyable, right? It makes it easier. When Walt sees me and he says, hello, how's Stacy? Hey, she's great. How are the kids? Hey, Walt, I do have a favor for you, right? It's, then he's doing it for a friend, not just some third party that his company's paying, to get a project.
You mentioned when we talked earlier, you mentioned that you had a giveaway for our guests.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, if people are interested, I'd love to talk to them. And the first 5 people that reach out, I'd be happy to do a 2-hour, complimentary, workshop with, on addressing questions or digging into parts of our overall professional services optimization framework.
Who wants to get in touch with you? What's the best way?
Yeah. So email is Mark with a K at ASAF Advisors. That's ASAPHADVISORS.com.
Awesome. And you're on LinkedIn as well?
Correct. Yep. There are a number of Mark Sloans, and I can't remember which one I am, but I'm the one when you see the image with the high forehead.
Good, man. Perfect. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed our talk. Been certainly helpful to me. I'm sure that our listeners and viewers got a lot out of it as well. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Rick, and look forward to hearing from folks.
Awesome. Mark Sloan, everyone.